Graham here, living the dream on Saturday the 20th of July 2024, and I'm sitting in seat 13A, which is one of the club suites on board a British Airways Boeing 777-300ER from Los Angeles across to London Heathrow. For those of you who watch the channel on a regular basis, you will know that I travel British Airways quite a lot, and I've reviewed many of their flights here on the channel, but I've called this particular episode When a British Airways Works, They Work Well, or maybe they don't. It will very much depend on the outcome of this particular trip review from Los Angeles across to Glasgow via London Heathrow. So the fact that I'm sitting here in 13A, we took off just over 40 minutes ago, bang on schedule. So far, so good, I guess. But will it still be as good when we reach London Heathrow and have to transfer to our flight to Glasgow? We'll just have to wait and see, guys. So if you choose to watch this episode, you can follow Fiona and I all the way from Los Angeles to Glasgow via London Heathrow. Fingers crossed. Hi, I'm Graham, and this is my wife Fiona, and we have always had a work hard, play hard philosophy. From London to New York, and of course the Caribbean, we live our dream through travel. And of course, the odd cocktail. And here on YouTube, we create our memories while living our dream. So come and join us as we share our memories with you. When we left off in the last episode, Fiona and I had just stepped off the free Hilton LAX shuttle bus, which sort of dropped us off outside the Tom Bradley International Terminal here at LAX. When we stepped onto the bus at the Hilton LAX, the driver asked us which airline we were flying with. Of course we said British Airways, and that is exactly where he dropped us off. It was still a little bit of a walk to the terminal, but it did look like there was some improvement works ongoing here at the Tom Bradley Terminal. Anyway, Fiona and I headed inside looking for the British Airways check-in counters. Locating the right check-in area for British Airways, we were now looking for the dedicated British Airways Club check-in area, or business class check-in area as it's sometimes known. And of course, it's right next to the completely empty British Airways first line. And when we arrived, roughly 2.5 hours before our flight, as you can see, there was no queue at the club line either. And in the end, check-in was super fast, super easy, with extremely friendly British Airways handlers here at LAX. So next up for Fiona and I was TSA, and it was very interesting to see security checking boarding passes before we even went up the escalators. And reaching the top of the escalator, we would now be heading into TSA, something I'm not going to film, guys. However, unlike airports in the UK and mostly Europe, Flying Club World doesn't give you access to fast-track security here at LAX. So as we leave TSA at the Tom Bradley International Terminal here at Los Angeles LAX, I will say this: the TSA agents were super friendly and extremely professional, which is clearly becoming a thing for Fiona and I here in the United States. And I think from memory, TSA took only about 15 minutes, which wasn't too bad in my books, especially as there was no fast track for Club World passengers. But there is a lounge, and that's exactly where Fiona and I are now. This lounge is not a dedicated British Airways lounge, it is more of a One World lounge, and it's particularly shared with Qantas, and that's why it is probably so good, guys. It's not a British Airways run lounge. I'm not going to say the lounge was quiet when we were here, but it certainly wasn't busy, and Fiona and I had no problem finding a seat. While Fiona chose to relax, I decided to do a little bit of work. However, Fiona did bring me what she described as a Spanish curry, and it was quite good, guys. The beer was also pretty good as well, and if there was only one criticism I had here of the One World Lounge at the Tom Bradley, was the fact that the power sockets were recessed which means my UK adapter to US plug, of course, didn't fit. So I was running on battery here on my laptop. And yes guys, the dessert was absolutely amazing. But it wasn't long until our flight to London was called. And yes guys, I do mean there was a tannoy announcement. I know guys, how retro, but very good. So the BA Club World lounge experience here at Los Angeles International is pretty good guys. There was a good choice of food and drink. And as I said earlier, it wasn't very busy with only BA flights being called. And there were quite a few heading from LA to London this evening. I'm going to make the assumption guys that if you're flying American from LA to London, you're going to be at a different terminal and therefore using a different lounge. And if you watch the channel on a regular basis, you will know that I'm not a fan of American Airlines on their transatlantic services. So I'm unable to judge their lounge experience versus British Airways on this premium route between LAX and Heathrow. And by US standards, this Tom Bradley terminal is very impressive guys, with plenty of eating choices and shops if you're not in the lounge. And the good news, Fiona and I didn't have far to walk to our gate. And if you watched the last episode, you'll know what I mean by that. Because when we stepped off our flight from Kona here at the Tom Bradley last night, it took us around 45 minutes to walk to the baggage reclaim belts. And right in front of us now is our gate for this evening's British Airways 777-300ER service across to London Heathrow. And in usual British Airways policy, boarding was done strictly by group numbers. And because we were travelling in the Club World cabin or business class, we were in boarding group 2. First class was the only group ahead of us. And these guys are the relatively new British Airways Club suites on board this Boeing 777. And I was reading recently that all British Airways long-haul aircraft out of London Heathrow, except the Airbus A380, have been retrofitted with these new club suites. And if you're wondering what Fiona and I were discussing right now, we were actually talking about which window was going to be better for engine views. So lucky or unlucky for me, I'm in 13 Alpha. And yes guys, I had a nice clean window for this particular journey across the Atlantic. So what's for dinner?
Oh, dinner. I thought we were doing cocktails.
Cocktails? We can do cocktails.
Cocktails. Ginseng, a tantalising mix of premium beans, gins, citrus and sparkling water served over ice. Cranberry blush, refreshing and colourful mix of vodka, orange, cranberry and a dash of spritz over ice. Or a Johnny Ginger, premium whiskey with orange juice ginger ale served over ice and a slice.
Quite fancy that.
Johnny Ginger.
Johnny Ginger.
I'm doing cranberry blush.
Right, so what's for dinner?
For dinner, Scottish lunch, we have tomato and coconut soup. I'm reading what you would like. So tomato and coconut soup with pumpernickel croutons. There is sweet potato carpaccio, and there is also olive oil marinated cream prawns, but they're not suitable for you. Main course, braised beef short rib with potato gratin, charred broccolini, baby carrot bean jus. That'll be fancier cod with saffron fennel mussolini, sauteed kale, lemon beurre blanc, or buffalo mozzarella ravioli, mushroom parmesan panna sauce. That'll be you.
I think I'll have that.
Dessert is raspberry and vanilla panna cotta, chocolate lava cake, that'll be you. Cheese and biscuits for me.
And for breakfast?
You can have fresh seasonal yogurt, Greek yogurt with pumpkin, passion fruit compote, oats, pumpkin seeds and granola. Main course, you've got scrambled egg, pork sausage, bacon, mushrooms, tomato and hash brown, which is your full breakfast. You can have a leek and cheese frittata, or you can have Belgian waffles with the sour cherry compote, dulce de lait sauce.
And yes guys, there was a pre-departure beverage. And we toasted again once my orange juice had been replaced by champagne. Well done, British Airways. So the one thing I do like about these new British Airways Club suites is there's plenty of storage. Something the old yin-yang club seats that I still love to this day
suffered from. And yes, we were pushing back bang on time, which meant we were on our way back to London. In my opinion, this Southwest Airlines livery is one of the nicest in the sky. It's certainly a lot more vibrant than the Euro white with a splash of colour that we get on the side of the pond. And while the departing runway 24 left was right next to us, we'd be going on a sightseeing tour of LAX this afternoon, because we would be departing on runway 25 right this afternoon on the other side of the airfield. And it was really cool seeing all of these Airbus A380s lined up at the Tom Bradley terminal. First being Lufthansa, of course, and the next being an A380 of South Korea's Asiana airline, followed by British Airways. And if I had known that British Airways had an A380 service to London tonight, I'd have probably chosen that instead of the Boeing 777. And sitting right next to the BA A380 is the A380 of Korean Airlines. Yep guys, the other South Korean airline. And at the time I recorded this episode, Korean Airlines and Asiana Airlines were going through a merger. And next to the Korean Airlines Super Jumbo, we're Back to the Future and the Airbus A350 in the colours of Iberia, the national airline of Spain, of course. And this is us now passing the American Airlines part of the terminal. I'm not sure if this is still classed as part of the Tom Bradley terminal, guys. Maybe someone can comment and let me know. And while I do have a bit of a hate relationship with American Airlines, I also really like their livery too. It's very patriotic and therefore very American. As our BA 777 makes a number of left-hand turns, setting us up for a track northeast across the United States towards Chicago and then Canada and finally the Atlantic. This is where we say goodbye to the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean, of course, has been the key feature of this entire video series. So as we leave the massive LA metropolitan area beneath us, it'll be time for Fiona and I to settle in to this 10.5-hour flight back to the UK. And shortly after the cabin service started, my Johnny Ginger arrived. And while I'm a massive fan of whiskies and bourbons, let's just say I prefer them neat or on the rocks. But I do have to say that this packet of crispy somethings is pretty pathetic for business class, but always redeemed when the tomato soup arrived. It was rather tasty, guys. I did order the pasta, guys, but ended up with the beef short rib and gratin potatoes, and to be quite honest, I was pretty happy with the mistake. And on last night's flight from Kona to LAX, I'd started watching the first series of Clarkston's Farm, and by the time I stepped off this aircraft at London Heathrow tomorrow afternoon, I would have watched the entire first series. And by the time I'd started editing this particular episode, I'd completed series 3. It was a really good series, guys, and an eye-opener to British farming for me. And when dessert arrived, Fiona was 100% correct. I went for the chocolate cake. And straight after coffee, I'd be putting my seat into bed mode and trying to get some sleep. For me, Sunday arrived somewhere off the south coast of Greenland, about 2 hours out from London Heathrow. And I have to admit, it was a pretty comfortable sleep in the Club World Suites. And the breakfast service started with a croissant, some fresh fruit, Well, as fresh as you're going to get at 37,000 feet over the North Atlantic. And then there was that obligatory orange juice, served in a real glass, of course. Well, we're in Club World. Oh yes, and let's not forget that all-important cup of coffee. And then came what was described as a full English breakfast. Sausage, scrambled egg, hash brown tomato and a mushroom. Guys, if you want beans and brown sauce, I'm afraid you're going to have to fly Virgin Atlantic upper class. So as we begin our descent for London Heathrow overhead Wales, how would I sum up this, the longest part of our journey from LAX to Glasgow on board British Airways in the Club World cabin? You know, it was absolutely fine, and it was a very good and a comfortable flight. And as ever, the British Airways cabin crew just made the journey extra special. They were an absolute credit to the airline, and I'd even been chatting to one of the cabin attendants who I met on my recent flight back from Phoenix to London Heathrow a few months earlier. He's a really good guy. And I had to agree with them that the Airbus A350 is also my favourite aircraft in the BA fleet. Right, I'm going to shut up now as we make our way in to London Heathrow.
Good morning and a warm welcome to London Heathrow Airport at Terminal 5, the home of British Airways. If you would like to adjust your watch, the time here in London is 8 hours ahead of the time on the west coast, making it 11:40 in the morning. Please do remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the fasten seatbelt signs have been switched off and the aircraft comes to a complete and final stop at our parking stand. When it is safe to do so, take care when opening up the overhead stowages as items may have moved and could fall out causing injury. You may now make and receive calls as well as use all data services on your electronic devices.
And also, just to add my welcome here to London Heathrow Terminal 5, where Fiona and I had less than 90 minutes to transfer to our flight to Glasgow, so it was going to be a tight one, folks. And of course, the big question would be, if we made our flight to Glasgow, would our bags make the flight also? Well guys, if you want to find out, you're going to have to stick around and watch the rest of this episode. And the race was now on to make our connecting flight to Glasgow. If you'd watched my last British Airways connecting flight through Heathrow, the flight from Phoenix landed in Terminal 3 and we had to transfer over to Terminal 5 before connecting with my flight to Glasgow. Not so today, because we'd landed in Terminal 5 and of course we'd be departing from Terminal 5 heading up to Glasgow. But first we had to catch this underground train from the sea gates over to the main terminal, and yep, we failed, so we crossed the concourse to catch the next train to the main terminal. And we wouldn't have long to wait because they operate every 5 minutes.
This is B Gates. Please take all belongings with you. This is arrivals, baggage relay and flight connections all terminals. Please take all belongings with you. This transit ends here. Please leave the vehicle.
Arriving in the main A-Gates terminal here at T5 London Heathrow, Fiona and I needed to get upstairs through the UK border landing process, which by the way is completely automated here at London Heathrow and a total breeze to get through. And after the UK border immigration process, we'll be heading upstairs to security check-in. Yes guys, our bags would have to be scanned once again before we'll be allowed to travel on our domestic service north to Scotland. Right guys, we're now approaching UK border control. It's time to stop filming for a while. And as I said a little earlier, the UK border immigration process here at London Heathrow is always pretty good, or it certainly has been when I've transited the airport. I know there has been some industrial action this year, and as a result I'm just going to say that Fiona and I have been pretty lucky. However, security screening here at London Heathrow Terminal 5 is, and has been, and certainly was today, a complete joke. It took us ages to get through, the queues were enormous, we were constantly being held before we were allowed to enter the screening area, which took ages. The upshot was, guys, that our boarding gate for our flight up to Glasgow had already been announced, so there was going to be no BA lounge for Fiona and I on this particular transit. And because the British Airways lounge isn't that good here at London Heathrow T5, which actually is the home of British Airways, we just wanted to get on board our domestic flight and get home to Glasgow as soon as possible. But this weekend was also the first weekend, I believe, of the English summer school holidays, so T5 was completely crowded and chaotic on this particular Sunday afternoon. And with the English all flocking to get out of the country, the Scottish were all flocking to get back into the country and get away from those holiday destinations that would be now filled with English. Sorry guys, I'm not getting political, but it's just a way of life here in the UK. And because Fiona and I were in the Club Europe cabin, or the business class cabin, on the short domestic 1 hour service up to Glasgow, we were in boarding group 1, so we were first to board our Airbus north to Scotland. And as you will see shortly, business class here on most European airlines is the same seats that you will find in economy, but with a blocked off middle seat. And unfortunately, my bad luck with dirty aeroplane windows continues. From memory, our flight to Glasgow pushed back only a few minutes late, and we were now on our way to runway 27 left here at London Heathrow Airport. A KLM Cityhopper Embraer E2, I would have thought, is a pretty rare aircraft to be seen around Heathrow Airport. KLM typically send their Embraers to more regional routes like Southampton, Bristol, Cardiff, etc., leaving their larger Boeing 737-800s and 900s to serve their Schiphol Heathrow route. And the KLM is hot on the tails of a very nice, modern looking British Airways 787-9 Dreamliner. My plan for this episode was never to review the British Airways Club Europe product here on a domestic flight between London and Glasgow. I've said this plenty of times before, it's a pretty rubbish product with cold, unedible food. And it's something I discussed in detail during the first episode in this big Pacific Adventure series. But they were serving Heineken Zero, that's no alcohol beer, something I was glad to get back to after 3 and a bit weeks of high living in California and Hawaii. My focus for this episode was to look at the British Airways experience when travelling through London Heathrow from a long-haul flight to a local European service. And during the pandemic and post-pandemic years, British Airways have been very quick to cancel their short-haul services, leaving passengers transiting through Heathrow with a completely broken travel experience. And in fact, for nearly 3 years on every journey I'd made with British Airways through London Heathrow, I had many cancellations, if not a completely broken trip requiring major itinerary replanning. So as we start our approach into runway 23 at Glasgow Airport, I would sum up our experience with British Airways on this particular journey from LAX to Glasgow via London Heathrow as pretty darn good. Our flight from Los Angeles departed on time, it arrived in Heathrow on time, and while we departed only a few minutes late in Heathrow for this trip up to Glasgow, it was clear we were going to be arriving in Glasgow on time. Would our bags be arriving in Glasgow at the same time as Fiona and I? Well guys, you'll just have to stick around a few more minutes to the end of this episode to find out. So as we make our final approach to Glasgow overhead Mogai, I'm going to shut up and let you enjoy this landing into Glasgow, which will complete our big Pacific adventure.
Welcome to Glasgow. The time is approaching 5 to 3. Please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened until the fasten seatbelt signs have been switched off. When I say to do so, please take care when opening overhead lockers, as items may have moved and could fall out, causing injury. You may now make and receive calls as well as use all data services on your handheld electronic devices. And before leaving the aircraft today, please make sure that you have all of your personal belongings with you.
And welcome back to Glasgow, guys. If you've been following our entire big Pacific adventure, this is the last landing of so many flights that Fiona and I had taken through our entire trip to California and Hawaii. And as we taxied to the British Airways domestic terminal here at Glasgow, I switched on my mobile phone like the rest of the aircraft, only to receive an email from British Airways informing us that our bags had not made the transit through London Heathrow, and in fact they were still there. I was of course able to confirm this because each case had an Apple AirTag, and both AirTags had pinged in the last 10 minutes from Terminal 5. So at this point, guys, I could confirm that our 2 cases were in London Heathrow and Fiona and I were in Glasgow. British Airways were so close to getting it 100% right on this journey, and they failed on the last sector. And while it might sound like I'm laughing, guys, I'm thinking on the bright side, because I'm glad if our cases are to get lost, they get lost on the way back than on the way out. Leaving the aircraft, I knew there was absolutely no point going to the baggage carousel. My thought process was that most of the passengers with missing bags would still go to the baggage reclaim belt in the hope, the blind hope, that their bags really hadn't been left in Heathrow. And if all went to plan, that meant that Fiona and I would be at the front of the queue at the lost baggage counter. make it clear, guys, that as we make our way to the left baggage counter, it was a bit of a shit show. With so many passengers on our flight from London up to Glasgow transiting, and as a result, more than 100 passengers now without their luggage here in Glasgow. The two guys working for the British Airways lost baggage handling service here in Glasgow were completely overwhelmed. God love them. And you can't register your lost bags online without a lost bag registration number. So that meant you had no option but to come here, fill out a form and hand it to some poor guy who's simply going to key it into a computer system and send you on your way. It's without a doubt a completely archaic process that British Airways really do need to get a grip of. Not helped by the fact that Fiona and I chose to fly through London Heathrow on one of the busiest weekends of the year. But look at the bright side, guys. Fiona and I didn't need to hump our two big heavy cases home with us this afternoon after travelling for nearly 20 hours. And if things couldn't get better, we wouldn't be unpacking for another few days. At this point, we'd communicated with our taxi driver, who was now on his way in to the pickup point just across the road. As we headed to meet our taxi driver, I should tell you guys that our bags arrived home the next afternoon. When we woke up on the Monday morning, our Apple AirTags were telling us that the bags were already in Glasgow. And throughout late Monday morning, using the Apple AirTags, I was able to track both cases as they made our way out to our house via numerous other houses en route. So this, guys, is where I bring this episode and our big Pacific adventure to a close. 20 episodes has been the biggest miniseries we've ever produced for our YouTube channel. And coming up next is, of course, St. Lucia 24, where a series introduction has already been published here on the channel. So if you want to continue to follow Fiona and I on our next adventure, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to be notified when our next video is published. And if you've watched all 20 episodes in our big Pacific adventure, well done, guys. And thank you so much for your support.